as I reflect on this, I think that the media are in a very unenviable position on something like this because they have a number of different competing demands upon them, and it's almost the case that no matter what they decide to do, they're going to get criticized from some angle. And I think there are some real risks here for media coverage. We know, for example, that 40 years ago, more than that, Marshall McLuhan made the observation that terrorists are people minus identity. They will do anything to get coverage. And he observed back in the 1960s that the media often cooperate with the terrorist agenda to get coverage. A lot of times these crimes are motivated simply by disturbed people who want that time in the limelight. And so the media can't help themselves sometimes in giving coverage to this event or these kinds of events in providing exactly what people like that are going for. And so that's a real dilemma. That's a real problem that the media has, I think, when they try to cover something like this. We do know from the research that coverage like this can cause some individuals who consume that coverage to be primed to think similar thoughts. And so there can be an effect like that. And we know that that's there. There's good research on that. We also know that this kind of coverage of a horrible event like this can really pack an emotional jolt for a lot of viewers. That people who, we learned after the 9/11 events, for example, that people who consumed the most news coverage after those events were more likely than other people to suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder kinds of symptoms. So children, I think, are also at risk here. It's very difficult for parents to monitor in this constant news environment that we have, to monitor children's exposure. And young children, I think, are very susceptible to the emotional fallout of these things. There's also a desensitization effect that we have to deal with. So we know that media messages of traumatic events like this, if we consume these things regularly over time, we can become desensitized to these things such that they don't have as much of an emotional reaction because they become rather routine. That's a dysfunctional thing for society. We don't want to desensitize to this kind of horror and trauma. So there are a number of risks in the media coverage like that. I do think, though, that there is a possible silver lining here, if you can call it that. The media have the capacity to make a choice to frame these kinds of stories for us in a very particular way, such that it becomes apparent in the coverage of an event like this what an intricate underlying infrastructure of good people we have in our communities. And so to the extent that the media can focus on the heroic responses of people who came to the rescue in this situation, to the people in the medical community who have invested their lives to train, to help people who are in medical distress, the people in the educational system and in the churches, church communities, who are providing aid and comfort to the families who are going through these traumas. To the extent that the media can focus on that aspect of the coverage and take the focus off the disturbed people who perpetrated the crime, I think that to that extent we get a glimpse of the underlying goodness in our community. And there's really an opportunity there, I think. That it's an opportunity we'd rather not have on this kind of an occasion. But nevertheless, I think when the media is having to frame a story like this, they can really think about bringing out those dimensions of the story and focusing on those things rather than on the hideous terror that was perpetrated. And so I think that's really my major reflection on this as I think about the dilemma that the media is in. And it really is a dilemma. I mean, how do you cover something like this? You're really bound to cover it in some way. And I like to think about the choices that the media can make in terms of framing a story like that. Yeah, I think that to be the cynical side of me says here that the national news outlets know that the longer they can keep a story going, the higher viewership they have. And we know, for example, in the invasion in Iraq, CNN knew that their ratings tripled and quadrupled during the time of that invasion. And so I think that there is a dynamic that the media are aware of, that the longer they can keep a story going like this, that they know has the attention of the public, and the fresh angles that they can get, the more fresh angles they can get in that story, the greater the opportunity is to keep it alive. I think there's certainly a sense in which the media do play to that. One of the tensions here is that media organizations are businesses. They are in business. They have a right to be in business, and they have a right to make a profit. That has to be balanced, though, with the fact that the airwaves belong to the public, and there's a social responsibility when you have those airwaves at your disposal. So I think that the real tension here that the media outlets have to struggle with is how do we balance that? If we have a media that operate only for the bottom line, to get the most profit for that moment, then we have a media who are ignoring the social responsibilities that they have to serve the community. And so they have to be constantly, I think, talking about that tension and trying to work that tension out in a socially responsible way. That's exactly right, and that's the real dilemma that you're under from moment to moment. And I think that the pace with which all this is happening does not really contribute to the sort of reflection that we would ideally like to have. It's very difficult for media practitioners to make intelligent, reflective decisions when they are in an environment in which they have to respond literally in less than 30 seconds in terms of a decision to make on coverage like that. So I think it points to the need for media organizations to really sit down in times when they don't have that pressure to really think carefully about what their strategy is going to be, what their policy is going to be to cover an instance like that, and really have a strategic plan in place to know how they're going to try to balance these factors. That's what I would encourage media organizations to do, and I